My name is Sean Schaffner. I'm a socially engaged artist and founder of the People's Own Organic Power Project, or the POOP Project. Theater, documentary, film. I have copies of my book on hand. All about normalizing the do-do, everyone do-does, for the health of our bodies, planet, and global communities. I'm really great to see this session. I noticed that communications was one of the sort of sectors that was left off in that initial hand raising. They wanted to be like, oh, yes. You need us. Yes. You need us. Yes. So, yeah.
You need artists too.
I am Amy Hursknitz, and I am with Dig Deep. And I'm Evelyn Jones, I'm also with Dig Deep.
Oh, hi. I'm Cynthia Singersky. I'm a writer and photographer, and you guys should all come to the panel tomorrow about artists and water. Yes. Awesome.
Hi everyone, I'm Mara Jarvis. I work for the U.S. Water Alliance. I specialize in community engagement within our Environmental Finance Center. That was it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're just introducing ourselves by name and organization.
Hi, I'm Nathan Aragon. I work for Water for People.
Chloe, do you want to start?
Hi, I'm Chloe. I'm a communications manager.
Hi, I'm Denise Vaughn. I work for a company called Ferguson, and I lead our sustainability and our community efforts.
Doug Ebelow. I'm the executive director at H2O for Life. And we do K-12 education around the world water crisis and inspire young people to do service projects to support schools around the world that need access to water, sanitation, and hygiene.
Deborah Adams, Paper for Water. We use the art of origami to raise awareness, build community, and raise money for water and sanitation projects. And Jen's gone and sitting next to him. And I'll be at the art panel. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Portia Boggs. I'm the Director of Development for the Chris Long Foundation. We are a nonprofit. One of our big program areas is water access internationally and domestically. And our goal is to really both raise funds and raise awareness, largely through athlete engagement and using the high profile of professional athletes to raise awareness for the water cause.
Thanks for joining us and also sharing a little bit about yourselves and artists. I don't know, maybe I just need to raise my arm more. There we go. This is our, well, actually this does not represent our two latest team members. But as I said, we are a communication shop that is grant funded to provide free communications help to mostly grassroots groups working on water justice. Stella had a child and she started going to public school. Portland Public Schools not only has had like a lot of elevated lead levels for the past decade or so, but also extremely ceiling lead test results, and has just literally this year finished replacing all of the fixtures and some pipes to ensure that most of those sinks and faucets in Portland Public Schools are safe from lead. And my dad still lives in the Central Valley of California, where he has groundwater that is elevated arsenic and nitrate levels, and also has cancer. Oh, still personal. Okay, you're right. Very strange, because that is not where the device is. But so why human rights? Daryl Behill this morning at the plenary, if you attended, was talking about the fact that we got here because we collectively decided that some people weren't worthy of being treated equally, right? Because of this systemic dehumanization of tribal people, of black people, of low-income communities. And Mommy Hara from the U.S. Water Alliance talked about strategic and constructed invisibility. Constructed invisibility, right? Like, we have all agreed that we don't need to look at these problems, not the people in this room, but society collectively, and certainly decision makers collectively, and decided because of who's impacted, we don't need to pay attention. And so the antidote to that distancing that is happening is to actually encourage people to look because of our common humanity. And we get to that sense of connection by communicating in ways that speak to home and heart versus like technical policy jargon. We And that is where the work of communication and narrative is so important, right? Because we have these latent beliefs that haven't been activated yet. And the way to activate them is to literally immerse people in a culture of collective action, and also to share with them our sense that this is a fixable problem, and that other people around us are stepping up. And that when we step up and when we change this, then we all benefit because of our shared humanity, because of the shared public health stakes, because of the fact that we want everyone around us to live with dignity and to take care of their kids. Next slide, please. So we'd love for you all to turn to someone at your table and talk briefly, we'll give you like 5 minutes, about where you've seen or used rights-based messaging or storytelling around water and sanitation. What has resonated and what hasn't worked so well.
Like even when you just said 6, I was like, what human that doesn't work with water says things like that? Like, you know what I mean? Relate. Where when I think of this type of messaging, specifically around water and sanitation, I don't feel it's pervasive in the United States, but we've had this conversation multiple times about how the international water community is like, they get all the attention. Americans have more familiarity with the idea of water access or lack thereof in other countries than here. And I wonder, you know, if there is something that could be learned from the organizations that have successfully, like, you know, sort of created campaigns around international water issues. Like, you know, it's like everybody in the world, or in this country, I feel, anybody that you ask on the street, and you say, hey, have you ever seen one of those commercials where they have, you know, the sad song in the background, and they have African children getting water from like one spigot or something that, we've all seen it, but I struggle with that because it's like, yes, it's raised awareness of the issue, however, it has been exploited, in my opinion, you know?
Exploitation, like it's right?
It's a whole different category.
Exactly.
One is taboo.
I know you guys are not done, but we'd like to hear. Who wants to share something that they've done that worked, or seen that worked? Nobody's seen any of that.
So for us, the human rights messaging, when we're working in the classroom with young people, is very, very powerful. And it really does like move the needle, and in a lot of cases it's becoming necessary. If you're not talking about those issues when it comes to water, you're not as legit in a lot of the younger generations' eyes that we're hearing from our folks when it comes to this issue. But the flip side of that, as I was talking about, I was having a discussion with one of our corporate sponsors, and in one of our little pitch deck slides, it says, equity and justice is, one of our top priorities, and he was like, you need to have more red state words. And, it's kind of interesting to see how those kind of issues and the human rights versus the DEIJ stuff, and how that language is getting difficult to use, but the concept is still core to who we are. So I didn't have to go around that. Very interesting to hear.
Yeah, I see fingers nodding.
Yeah, I mean, like, we started having a similar kind of conversation. So, like, one of the things that I do is I have, like, public event classes for the public, obviously, about, like, toilets to make it approachable. And I always try to ground it in these stories of, like, here's a newspaper article, this is what happened, and explaining the, like, lack or the access, the rights issues. And everyone's always shocked at first about where it is, but then they always end up reflecting of, you know what, I have seen this in my community. So it's become a relatable thing that they've learned how to identify and, like, apply it into their daily life. But what we're also talking about similarly is, like, the word rights has become a really tricky word right now because of how some people are wanting to use it in this compassion way, and then other people are using it more in, like, an anchor-based way of feeling like their rights are being taken away. And it's a tricky line.
Yes. Yeah, no, I appreciate that part, and also this point about, while we may, as organizations and communities, be striving for justice and equity, sometimes that isn't the language that's most resonant across the aisle or across the country. And you're right, and then is something that is a privilege that you have to, if the community doesn't have the ratepayer base, then that's why they don't have the system. If they don't have the ratepayer base, then why haven't they built wealth in their community? I mean, the story about individualism and about people being responsible for their circumstances that is keeping these systems in place. And we can start to shift the systems by changing the story that this is something that everyone should have access to, and that we can also ensure that everyone has access to it by acting together. And I took this, so I'm going to hand it to Sarah to talk about stories.
Great. So we started kind of talking about these like units of communication. So I just want to take a minute. We're going to kind of define some of those, and then brainstorm together and think about what are the kind of current stories and narratives that we're telling about water, and how do we shift that. So stories and messages and frames, which we'll get to in a sec, these are like the basic building blocks, the basic units of communications. And each of these units basically influence, when we take them in, they influence how they remind us how we think about an issue, how we feel about it, how we might choose to act, and influence those actions. And I think about each of these as a drop of water that then comes together and forms this broader narrative wave. So this is a chart from a group called the Narrative Initiative that we really love. It's their wave model of narrative change. And if we think about stories are kind of like on the individual level, at which we sort of experience an issue, and they come together and they develop this narrative, which is sort of the level at which society is moving. And we're going to talk about dominant cultural narratives, which are the collective myths and values and worldviews that are sort of like the ocean that we're all swimming in when we're doing our work, when we're doing our education or our advocacy, and they really underpin the perceived reality that we have. And I just want to say, like this, like from like an academic perspective, we're like, see, it's like step 1 and 2 and 3. Like this is really hard. It takes a long time. It's ebbs and flows. There's going to be like mixed water metaphors all out the wazoo here. And so I just want to like acknowledge that this isn't like a linear process by any means. It's not easy to do. It takes a long time, but that's what we're all working on together, whether it's through media, arts and culture, advocacy, education. All of these things build on each other toward this broader vision of the world that we want to live in, and they're all important components of it. But to do that, we have to kind of understand, like, how are people perceiving these issues now? So what I want to do is talk about some of the dominant narratives that already exist. And there are ones that help us, and there are ones that hurt us. And they're gonna come up on the screen in a second. Hold for a minute. But just wanted to get an idea, like brainstorm is a safe space. This is there's no right or wrong answers. Can people think of like what are some dominant narratives they feel that are out there that are like making it harder to do your job, making it harder to realize this vision? Any ideas? Yeah.
I have one which is like, we run into a lot that's, well, why isn't for international work, why doesn't their government do that? Why are people
Yeah, so like institutional integrity, trusted institutions or not, who's responsible? Yeah, exactly. We'll get to that in a second. Yeah.
The perception that water is a global issue isn't the challenge that is in the U.S.
The idea that if one utility makes a mistake, they're all making mistakes.
Okay. Sure. Why don't they just move? I'm gonna get to that in a second. Yeah.
We run into issues where it's like not appropriate to talk to you. I mean, like we were talking about earlier, we have STEM curriculum that's free for teachers, and we have school system superintendents email me and say, you cannot use these terms in our class.
pervasive is this idea of American exceptionalism. So like, if you heard a politician start a speech with like, the greatest nation on earth, raise your hand. I should see everyone's hand. It's like a cliche at this point. I mean, even this morning you hear, it's like something we even use in this space, like, you say like in one of the richest countries in the world, this is still a problem. And that context is kind of used to instill feelings of shock and outrage in people, to get them to pay attention. The kind of dark flip side of this, and something that will like stick with me forever, is in 2008, after President Obama was elected, Michelle Obama gave a speech and she said something about like, for the first time, I'm really proud of my country because we'd elected the first Black president. And the temper tantrums in the media about a comment like that, that's because of this like deeply instilled worldview in the U.S. of this idea of American exceptionalism. This is it's a myth. Like, it's not a real thing. Nations are a social contract. I mean, we could go down that whole rabbit hole. But these ideas are rooted in colonialism and white supremacy. But at the same time, for better or worse, they are dominant narratives that we can decide whether or not we want to tap into. It's just a choice that we're making. There's some context in which it's very effective. Again, like with speaking with politicians, it's something that resonates with them. And so if you want to lean into that, that's an option. It's sort of like knowing your audience. So some of the, if we could click like 4 times. So some of the harmful narratives that we've been talking about, like this idea of individualism, one more. The myth of meritocracy, it's too expensive, our relationship with institutions, the commodification of water. These are all ideas that basically we're like swimming upstream against. And so we want to, and Nicole really alluded to this, like I think that the most harmful one is this idea of like individual responsibility, this myth of meritocracy. So like when you hear, why don't you just move? That's basically what the, like, if you're thinking about like at its most basic level, like probably without even thinking that's what you're thinking, like that's the idea, this idea of like we are 100% in charge of our own destinies, and any failing that we have is like our fault. And it doesn't think about the bigger picture, which is like, if this is like, you know, like if your family was forced to live in a place, or it's the only place you could buy land, or it's the only neighborhood that was available to you to buy a home, and then something's not working there, these institutional problems cause a big safety issue like access to clean water, and then you're told, well, just move to the city, to a different part of the city. You know, it's like kind of there's a disconnect between the sort of cause and effect there. And there really is this pervasive idea in the U.S. It's like, if you're poor and you don't have the basic necessities, the things like economic security, housing, water, food, like it's your fault. Or, you know, if you are poor and you want to like bring joy to your family, and so you spend money on something like birthday presents or cake, that you're being irresponsible because you're not only spending your money on the very basic necessities. Like, these are real ideas that really, really, really hurt our efforts to universal access to safe, affordable water and sanitation. And so we just have to be really aware of that, and there are ways that we want to shift that narrative or work around it or lean into things that really put people in a mindset to be with us. But you just have to understand that these are true challenges that we face. So on that uplifting note, we want to, if we can go to the next, just one, yeah. What are some helpful narratives that exist that put us on the right foot and move the ball forward?
We all drink water.
Yeah, everybody drinks water. It's something we need.
It's human right.
Mm-hmm.
But like the we can do it, like we
Yeah.
can do this.
Exactly.
We're the
It's promising.
promising nation.
Some will be on our next screen somewhere. Okay, can we go forward? Yeah, so this idea of interdependence, that we can lean on one another, and collective action. The problems are solvable, so thank you for saying that, Heather, perfect setup. And the idea that something that isn't just for people. I know we're using like water as a human right, but like water isn't just for us to use, it exists, it's part of our environment, we're in relationship with it together. These are kind of ways of approaching issues and telling stories that reinforce things that help kind of get us in a current that's sort of going the way that we're already going, makes it a little bit easier. So next, we've got, what's the next slide here? Okay, this is, I'm going to explain a little bit about like what a frame is. All these terms like story, narrative, frame, and it's all, you don't really need to remember that, honestly. And this is where my metaphors will all come together in this picture. So, stories, messages, these are all units of communications, frames, and they sort of make up, they're the tiles of our narrative mosaic. So we've got like narrative wave, narrative mosaic, so we've got a mosaic of a wave to bring it together. And if narratives consist of these collective stories and kind of convey this common worldview, this like shared, this society level kind of shared interpretation of the world. Frames are like the individual lenses that you wear. It's how you filter information, how you, as an individual, like everybody's basically wearing like different glasses that's informed by our family and our upbringing and our education and the media that we take in, who we talk to, what we listen to, and everybody wears a unique set of glasses, and that's how we take complex ideas and sort of filter them into simple ways of understanding for our minds. And this is like, everybody does this. It's how you can kind of have the same piece of information given to two different people, but if their lenses they're wearing are really different, they're going to take them in a totally different way. So like, to use the pandemic as an example, like, you know, March 16th, 2020, I think is when like I lived in Denver, when they were like, okay, everything's shut down, stay home for 6 weeks. And at the start of the pandemic, there was this really shared narrative around like, we're in it together, we're gonna protect each other, we're gonna do what's right for our community, like saving elders, and I mean, it was like truly, like it's hard, I don't know, I mean, I'm putting some of my personal lens in here as I tell the story, but like, you know, it was like hardening, it was good, and it didn't last long, it was kind of depressing, I think about it. And then things got politicized, and then, you know, whether or not you kind of believed in the efficacy of like vaccination or wearing masks or whatever, it like sort of became like a signifier of one's like belief system. And that I think is just an example of how like the same piece of information now coming to you is just filtered through all these things and kind of changes. And so similarly, we want to think about the kind of, it's similar to these narratives, but I did it on my own computer.
Oops, sorry.
Go back. No, you're good. So similarly, you want to think about like the kind of lenses people are wearing, how they might take information in, and the frames that are going to help us go with the current rather than swimming upstream. So I know, and it's not the perfect metaphor because like the bear and the salmon are like in their ecological, they're doing their thing, but like what I want to be is like whatever, I don't know fish names, but like whatever the fish that's like off to the side, swimming down the stream, bear's not paying attention, like that's where I want to be. So we're going to play a little game where we're going to look at some different phrases that you might hear out in the world and think about what kind of frames they like put you into, and it'll help us understand the kind of thinking about like, okay, what kind of frame is our message putting people into, and how do we combat that? And you sort of have to think about like the audience you're trying to reach, because again, it's like not like a one size fits all. But one thing I do want to talk about, like this exercise can feel really like it's like kind of intellectualizing what is actually like a really like in some ways a physical experience. So at the end of the day, when we're talking about like tapping into like deeply held beliefs and worldviews, like these are like feelings you feel in your gut. And so like I just encourage you to like practice our mindfulness and really think about when you're doing these kind of gut checks or developing these things, how do they make you feel? And how might they make someone else feel, and what feelings are you trying to tap into? So like, if we want to feel, if we're thinking about like framing that puts us in this like scarcity mindset where we're like afraid, or we feel like we're fighting to get what's ours at the expense of somebody else, that fear, for me, that puts me in like this flight or fight mode. Like I feel like my chest gets tight. I'm not like breathing well. Like that's not really a helpful place to be in when we're thinking about like collective universalism, solidarity. And so that's not the kind of like embodied feeling that we want people to feel when we're talking about our work. It's not to say it all has to be positive, like righteous anger has its place, and that can get you in. If I want to think about like hopefulness or being interconnected with other people, those things bring me joy. When I think about working in solidarity with other people, that kind of calms me down. Like I don't feel alone. It helps me relax. It gets me out of that fight or flight. So like, again, this is kind of like this intellectual exercise, but like try to get out of the head and really feel like, what's my body telling me when we're going through this? Because those are the kind of insights that we're really trying to get. So we go to the next one. So one quick one. So if you hear something that says affordable housing nearby is going to decrease my property value, I've heard it. We've all heard it. What kind of frame do you feel like this is putting people in? Or what frame are people in when they're saying something? Scarcity. Elitist. Yeah. For me, if you do one click, for me this is like this zero-sum thinking, and I think that's really important in this kind of work because we're trying to get out of the idea that we're trying to get into this place of like universalism, collectivism as a broader community. Because if you're in a place where you're like, if you get helped, I get hurt, like that's no bueno. Like that's not gonna help us get where we're going. And so, anyway, we go to the next one. Rivers are living beings. What kind of feelings is this? Connection. Yeah, connection. It's a little woo-woo. Yeah, I mean, it's a depend. You gotta know your audience, right? Yeah. So this one, I put, if you go to the click, like, it could be interconnectedness, but it's also like this kind of tapping into this like sort of spirituality vibe, which like works. It works for some people, and I don't know. That's how I feel. Doesn't mean it's right, but this idea, we're trying to kind of get out of this like commodification idea where everything has to be bottled and bought and sold and paid for. All right, next one. All right, if you didn't waste money on a new phone, you wouldn't need assistance. This idea of like assistance, we work a lot on issues on, we've talked a bit about kind of affordability broadly. I think this conversation's been a lot about like access in terms of like people literally not having like a hookup to a tap that's working or a septic system or a sewer system, but like we work a lot on issues around like water bill assistance and affordability, and this is something that comes up in kind of this denigration of like our social sense of being there. Right? Anyway, so I just maybe talked too much. What do you guys think?
Lame.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. Yeah, it's this like meritocracy thing or like handout kind of language. It is othering, it's very othering. That's a good point. I can't remember what, we can click one click. What did I do here? Yeah, personal responsibility, austerity, this idea that like you can only have like, I mean, not to say, I feel like in today's society, I feel like, I mean, I've heard people say this, and it's like, have you tried to get a job without a smartphone? Like, what are you talking about? Like, this idea of, like, one of the other. But this idea of austerity, that people deserve what they get, that we shouldn't be helping each other. All right, one more. Water is PPE. Do people know what PPE is? PPE is personal man. Like, I don't know, it makes me think of like safety. It makes me think of safety. And this is yeah, and it's like thinking of water as like if you went onto a construction site, you would be like, where's my hard hat? That's what water is for everyone. It's like the hard hat that helps us get through. So, one click. So safety, public health. So that was something. It's interesting now because people are like, oh, it makes me think of the pandemic because that's what we were trying to get people to say during the pandemic. So that makes sense. Okay. Next. All right. So that's kind of like basics, getting into like what are the narratives on water? How do we get into these like spaces where people are like their heads are nodding, their hearts are pumping, they're with us, and telling stories. One thing I'll say is this is from I'll make sure I credit this person. A recent blog I read from a narrative strategist named Brett Davidson that I really liked because research shows when people feel like they're put into context where like they can tell they're trying to be persuaded to, they like tune out. And so as communicators and people who work on advocacy or just people who I know you guys are working in like a school context where it's like, oh, if it comes across as like persuasion, people are like, oh, I don't want to do that. I want to what's an antidote to that is thinking about not trying to manipulate or persuade folks, but being in relationship and building connection. That's what this is all about. So we can do that in a ton of different ways. We can do that even in our advocacy work. We can do that, and that's what we should be focusing on. And that means also delivering stories in lots of different venues. We'll get into this, but it's like we want to be seeing this stuff in the news from trusted messengers, but we also want to see it in like creative art programs. We want to see it from the content creators that we're following online. Have incredible, when they're called influencers for a reason. We want to see it in the movies and the music, as well as from the NGOs that we really believe in, or the politicians that we really like. Okay, next one. And so one way to do that is to get outside of the jargon and to really talk to people. We've got educators in the room. I always say, like, when I'm doing trainings with folks about like media training, I'm like, say it. Like, if you've got a 5th grader at home, like, if you can explain it to them in a way that's reasonable and understandable, like, that's like where we should be all the time. And even when we're in a room like this, that's where we should be. Like, we need to talk like real human beings to each other. So saying like water we're using at home instead of domestic, stuff like that. We even were just talking before this, we didn't put it on here, like, impaired system. Like, what does that mean? What is an impaired system? It means there's either like toxic water or like broken pipes, and that clean water is not getting to your house. Like, what does that mean? Even like sanitation and hygiene, it's like that means you can go somewhere and wash your hands and take a shower and wash your dishes. Like, that's what that means. And so really connecting the language to family, to home, to these kind of shared values. Next up, oh, we're doing really good on time. Okay. This is so exciting. I have just a couple more slides, and then we have kind of like an exercise that we'll do. All right, next one. So we talked about how we have to like shift narratives. You have to be in like all these different avenues and talking to people in lots of different ways. We can do that, and it's not just because you want to get different people in their different places. We want to get the same person in lots of different places. So it's like it takes repetition to kind of like incept the culture. So a couple examples here, like mass culture, so art, music, the sort of cultural effect. On the far left, we've got the poster from this, the Water is Life Music Festival, which is a semi-annual music or concert put on in Dilute, Minnesota, to stop a carcinoid pipeline. So that's an example of kind of like cultural organizing. We've got mass media on the bottom here. The Power of Water. This was the ABC test in the media, whatever, we don't have to get into that today, but in some ways, like third-party validations, people are not hearing it straight from like a source they might see as trying to persuade them, but through the media. On the top right, we've got GIFs. We worked with a fun communications work called Into Action to create a bunch of GIFs and memes about clean water issues, because we need a little levity. Like like it's cute. There's nothing wrong with being cute, guys. Like cute and fun is all good. Like let's laugh along the way. Like it's okay. It's like these are serious issues, but like we have to like have fun. Like people want to. It's gonna be fun too. And then through things like mass movement. So the picture in the middle for Better Bayou Stop LNG, I took that picture in New Orleans in March when I was down there for an event, and on the water, I don't know what the word, this is where we don't need technical jargon. The things on the street where they get to the water main. Water manhole, there you go. Some of the LNG organizers were like connecting the dots between fossil fuel infrastructure and the water people are drinking in their communities. And so painting, had painted a bunch of the water manholes around like the French Quarter and Princeton Street. So I was walking around and just saw that. It was like, and you get this stuff through all these different avenues, and over time that like builds up and kind of creates this like this collective truth that you're like don't even know why it's truth, but it's because it's like become part of our narrative evolution.
It's like a saying, stop lying.
That too.
Yeah.
Wait, say that again?
It looks like it's saying, stop lying.
Oh, stop lying. Stop lying here. Yeah. I mean, well, fair enough. Yeah. Okay, next slide. So I'm gonna just recap and then have an example, and then we'll do our activity, and we can stop if people have comments or questions. So this is a great picture from Milwaukee Water Commons. They have done, this awesome organization, if you're not familiar, do a lot of work on education, working with artists, and doing these kinds of like installations. But anyway, so messaging the human right to water, the main things that we want, it's not like a prescriptive answer, like say these words, make this ad, do this fundraiser. It's like these ideas that we kind of want to help emphasize in your work. So hope and opportunity, put us like this idea of kind of universalism, building the bigger we. We want to promote human dignity and solidarity, and we want to make sure that the stories and the storytellers are reinforcing these messages over and over and over again. The next slide, this is a picture from the top of NCAA's Clean Water Issue Brief this year, and I use this as an example because I thought they just did like a bang up job on this, and so like tip of the cap. So I'm going to read every year for their legislative lobby days, so all the chapters all across the nation go into their own state legislatures, talking broadly about issues that the organization's working on. And for their Clean Water Issue Brief this year, these were the 3 bullet points of their stance on clean water. Clean water is a basic human right, should be accessible to all regardless of economic status or racial background. Point 2, every level of government bears responsibility that its citizens have access to critical necessities, including safe drinking water. And 3, the input and well-being of all communities must be factored into water policies and any conversations on this critical issue. So I thought that was just like a really, this is a great resource, and I think illustrates a lot of these points really well. And then obviously there's like additional personal stories and people, What's that?
Only integration.
No, of course, yeah. As you can see, we've like copied a million other organizations that we admire. So it's all
Maybe you mean wastewater.
This is like your starting point of brainstorming. So they're saying you can use this to build up like downstream exposed. This right now, which is going like.
Play around with them.
What is that language would you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where the dating comes in. If you're doing it good. All right. Good person. Come back. Go out with them. I don't want to stop the great conversations, but I was reflecting on the fact that I was supposed to like pause before the activity and be like, does anyone have any questions, comments, but I didn't. So sorry about that. But we wanted to use our last 10 minutes to ask for any volunteers who'd be willing to kind of share what they've come up with or any insights from their discussions. And we can use this time if there's like conundrums or questions or thoughts as well, because I whiffed on that portion. Sorry. So, all right, who's brave? Brave soul, willing to share.
I don't know if we came up with any real actions or
That's okay.
direction. We did.
Let's get a summary from table
This
5
table.
back.
Yeah. So we were talking a bit about a challenge that we have organizationally at Water for People, of being able to present our work, our impact in a softer way that is not necessarily related to cost per person metrics or a lot of the hard data that funders usually work for. I have to go back. I work on our fundraising team. So that's been something we've been tasked with in terms of, there is money out there, right, for infrastructure work in the U.S. As Daryl mentioned, like money's never been the problem. It's about connecting the people to the money, ensuring that communities have an understanding, long-term sustainability issues and like that. It's just something that funders have a challenge understanding and funding. So a few things that we came up with was kind of being really specific about sharing some of the messaging, the stories, with that real language, and like getting as detailed of an issue and a community, and then tying that into the donor and being like, let us as an organization lead in this space. Like, this is what's happening, but we need you to trust us, and we need you to be understanding that you say you love sustainability, but like this isn't an overnight process. And so just like taking the donors and funders on that journey, which we know takes time. So, so I think that was the key takeaway. And really, like, even in tying into some of those conversations, and we talked about the new, the U.S., the vessel, the wash access legislation piece, and like how much time that really took to just get in front of a senator's desk, and like, but the real long-term impact of that is so much greater than just, a small investment here, a small investment there, but you can't measure that in a simple way, right? And so like just being able to have those stories in our pocket to share with funders of like, this is the work that's happening on the ground, we need your buy-in, and we need you to just trust us as an organization that this is the best path forward.
I'm curious if people have other like thoughts or input. Like one thing we talk about is like, and it sounds like you're kind of getting at this, is like it's about the what. Like what's the benefit? Like how would that change, like demonstrably change like a real person's life rather than like focused on the process and like but yeah, I think that idea of those kind of bills, like I can't remember the name of it, but the bill that was just released last week, Wash Act. Okay, thank you. That's an easy one to remember. Or the Tribal Clean Water Access Act, or I'm butchering the name. Like those are I was talking to someone, they're like, well, what are the chances that passes? I was like, that specific bill, like 0, but like they're flags in the sand. You know what I mean? Like those are important things that are like pointing towards the vision and the direction, and they give us an opportunity to like talk about how we get there, and then eventually pieces of that get into like other stuff. And like that's how the bipartisan infrastructure law came together. It wasn't like someone was like, I have written the bipartisan infrastructure law. It was like, okay, let's cobble together like all these pieces and ideas and marker bills and all the things that kind of like everybody gets a little pumpkin pie.
I'd also say
and it shows like that we can, like, if we made a decision as a, you know, nation or to prioritize this, like we could like absolutely solve this problem. So it's like one of those things that sort of, I think you try to like, it sounds like a lot of folks are working on like education and sort of, for lack of a better word, like shock. Over time, this window back there is very entertaining. Like this sort of shock value to get people's attention of like this is a major problem in the U.S. that people aren't necessarily aware of. But then you have to like give people like, how do we fix it? Because if you just stop with the shock at the problem, like it's really hard. Like it's demoralizing. So that's yeah.
I'm just thinking about like I wish we had more money for communication specifically, because I think for many of the organizations represented here, like if we have that time or energy, we're likely to send an email that says, give me $10, because that's ultimately what we need the most of. You know, and what that means is we don't have the budget to put out the lifestyle content. We were talking about how like the video content that KP does ends up netting them a lot of those $5 and $10 donations. But actually that content is not saying give us a $5 or $10 donation. It's saying here's a story about what we're doing, right? And like how do we read? There's another organization out of Boston, the Ujima Project, that has all this money that they're re-granting to communities that are like not bank-based, they're community-based and trust-based. They put out a lifestyle magazine, and it's a lifestyle magazine that's like, let's assume the world we want already exists. Then what would people be reading about? And I feel like it's that sort of world-making, infrastructure, cultural. It's like those memes, those things that sort of get it into the parlance. And I'm curious about how we can see that.
I think one thing I like about that, and it is really hard, especially I mean we work with a lot of folks who are like the communications and something else that they're smaller. It's like really challenging, but or there isn't like a staff person. But the idea that like with that kind of like I think Dig Deep does this quite well, where you're building a relationship with your supporters in a way that's reciprocal and it's not transactional as support, even though that's like it is a transaction. Yeah, but it takes like trust and time and money to kind of invest in that and like sort of understanding like the long-term ROI of that. But
sorry, really quickly, one of the things, and I've been in the nonprofit sector, like that's all I've done, right? Not how many nonprofit sector. One of the things I can make that I was like, this is extraordinary. This is not how a lot of nonprofits or any sort of establishing kind of thinking about how we can build a brand, and it's off-putting. And for me, some things were off-putting at first because the language was not anything that I was familiar with, and I always in my heart like corporate style stuff, transaction. But I think in terms of the methods and the practice, and how do you build a relationship with the consumer? Gosh, how do you build a relationship with the supporter? How do you build a relationship with the collaborator? It's the same relationship concept, and I think that that's one of the things that works well for us is understanding it's a longer term proposition. And yeah, there's certainly some financial benefit, but it really is much more about our own support for the work and the client of the community and that bigger vision. It's not just scaling on low things, right? It's scaling the vision of this is principles going back in, affirmative language. That's what we did that direction. And I think that that's again that when I first saw some of the behind the scenes, I was like, build a brand? That's what is that? You know, it's terrible, but it's not, right? It's like it's not letting people know who we are and what we're trying to do and what we're trying to achieve. This is the vision. And that to me is a very different kind of opportunity that allows for the long term kind of growth and relationship.
Right. Piggyback on this really quick. So there's a great book called The Compass and the Nail. It was written by Patagonia's director of brand loyalty or whatever their loyalty program. And it's an amazing insight into how Patagonia built that relationship. And I truly believe the only difference between the way that Patagonia operates and we do is the end ask is to support what we're doing, not buy a $300 coat.
Exactly.
Right, but everything up to that moment should be exactly the same. Yeah. But I mean,
but 100%. Right? It's like the same practice, the same engagement.
Absolutely.
worldmaking.org.
Yeah, and I wanted to give a shout out, speaking about world making. So we have a new toolbox for advocates who are working on bipartisan infrastructure law and Inflation Reduction Act and infrastructure generally called justinfrastructure.org, Justice and Justice. And it really is about sharing a vision for what would just and resilient water infrastructure, but also just and resilient communities look like, right? Because infrastructure isn't just the stuff that gets us water in the fields of our wastewater, but it's like the very foundation upon which communities are built. And so that's the lens that we want to talk about. It's like, what does functional infrastructure make possible? And if we invest